Okay, so there's all kinds of different reasons why people think gold is important. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a back history. We're going to talk about the idea of gold and why it's valuable to us. And then we'll talk about the process of how we extract things from the Earth's surface. All right, so gold has been important for us for a long time. And it has to do with its rarity. All right, so gold is pretty rare overall. When we look at the uniqueness of it or how rare it is, it really isn't that much. So they're saying 20 meters by 20 meters by 20 meters cubed. That's all the gold in the world. It's not very big, right? So when we look at these pieces, it's always been a token of seniority or power, and that comes from the idea we were able to do this because of the characteristics of it. What does it mean to be malleable and ductile? Have a conversation at your table. Go. So what this means is I can flatten it out and I can actually make it into a wire, right? And so both of these are actually pretty critical when you're starting to use it, all right? Some of the other characteristics about gold are listed. One of the most important things about gold is it's very dense, all right? The density of it is why it's so heavy, right? When you look at people on TV and they're carrying gold bars, they always need a lot of people to carry the gold bars, right? Okay? The density is a significant piece of it. It's also significant because if you can flatten it out and it's dense, then it can protect from radiation, and that's why we see it in the space industry, all right? It also makes alloys really well, right? So that means it can be mixed with the other metals. That's all an alloy is talking about from your chemistry days. So it has been, over time, the people who have the gold are the more powerful countries or civilizations, okay? And that's been true since the very, very dawn of time, all right, because it's so rare. The Egyptians started it with it, and you saw it in the adorations that they did to their leaders. So gold was used all the time to actually show wealth, all right? When we go into the Lydians, the Chinese, the Greeks, they all used it, all right? And again, it was one of those things that we probably have our best vision of it with the Romans, right? And the Roman coins and the taxes that the Romans were taking and all that kind of stuff, all right? So civilizations have been able to do it. The beauty about the coin is that you can actually melt it and remake it into a different coin, right? So if I want to have Caesar's face on it, I can do that, or I can be the next civilization, take that and put something else in it, all right? So those are important for us. We would be remiss if we didn't talk about the Spanish, all right? And their quest for the gold, that's what drove a lot of the exploration in South and Central America. The conquistadors were all looking for it. There are many ships from that time frame that are at the bottom of the ocean with gold coins in it, all right? And shipwrecking is an exploration right now. That's a job. You can be, there's a lot of money for those would-be finders of it. There's a whole industry, a black market for gold from ships, because the law of the sea says that that ship, if you can prove it's yours, everything on that ship is still yours. All right? And that's the big question of when it comes to shipwrecks, who really gets the money? And it's wherever they came from. The key about gold is turning around and saying the gold standard, all right? So when it comes to a monetary device, gold was used, again, because of its rarity, it was able to say, this is how much something is worth. So if I was looking for a suit in the days when there was no cash, I would have a gold coin that I could end up giving a tailor to make a really nice suit. All right? Maybe that suit cost $60. All right? What ends up happening now is that we turn around and to get a really nice suit, you would have somewhere $4 to $5 grand that you would be spending on it. But it would still be worth that same gold coin if I had one. All right? So the price of gold has gone up, and so that's what the gold standard is considered. What is one good suit worth? This amount of gold. All right? Do you guys see how that works out? Okay. The gold standard was replaced with what? The American dollar. All right? And that's where the concern is. This, the $100 bill is the most counterfeited bill in the world, right? The US $100 bill. All right? So that's where the conversations, when you talk about national conversation, that's where they're coming from. The US being the gold standard. There have been a couple different gold rushes over time where they, people have gone places. North Carolina was the first one here in the States, 1799. When you look at it, California, we talked about the California gold rush, 1848. That's actually what drove a lot of the westward expansion that was there. And then the Klondike one, which is up in Alaska, which is what got a lot of people to Alaska in the first place. Okay, so when we look at these pieces, and as I mentioned before, it's used in the space for it. Today's reserves are only a small amount, right, or what seems like a small amount, and it all has to do, or it's stored in two different places. One would be the U.S. Bullion Depository that's in Fort Knox, and then the other one is the Federal Reserve that's in Manhattan, okay? Why this is so significant is because of the rarity of it, okay? When we look at the different metals that we have, it's talking about how much is on the surface of it and how much do we have available to use. Your iPhone is worth so much to the manufacturers, that's why they want you to give it back to them. They want it. Why do they want it? That means they don't have to go explore and find something else, all right? So remember, the exploration of things is how we find them. If we look at the reserves that we have, everybody's talking about if we continue on the path we are, how much time do we have before we run out of this stuff, okay? And so that's what table 8.1 was talking about when we were in your textbook. Take a look at this, the difference between ore and metals. Have a read. The idea when we talk about ores, we're talking about a composition of things. So you could have a lot of silicone, but it could be spread out all over the surface, right? It's actually combined with something else. So when I'm looking for an ore, the ore is going to be a heterogeneous mixture of other things. So once I find it, I have to mine it, I have to separate it, and then from that separation, I can use it in industry, all right? If I take your cell phone, those metals are already identified and I don't have to extract it. That's why the metals are important. What's going on in Africa right now? Think about it, have a conversation at your table. Geopoliticalness of Africa. Africa is a very interesting place, and the reason I say it's an interesting place because 50% of Africa does not have electricity. That was on the New York Times this weekend, all right? So 50% don't have electricity. When you have that, you have a lot of need when it comes to infrastructure, right? Who's going over there to help? The Chinese are going, the Russians are going, the US is going. Everybody's going over there to try to get a foothold in helping with the infrastructure because of the rare earth metals that exist. The next evolution of technology requires more and more rare earth metals. And where the sources are looks to be Africa. Because the places that have happened here in the US, we already found them, we're already working them, right? So we're trying to find other places. Okay, so when we find this ore that we can end up extracting, we have to get it out of the ground, all right? And that's when we start looking at the different styles of pulling it out of the ground. So the first one we'll look at is actually surface mining, or what's known as strip mining. Strip mining is you just take strips and strips of things off of it. I have a picture of myself in front of this dump truck, not this one, but this style of truck. Those tires are actually taller than me. They're absolutely massive. All right. This is a strip mining, and if you look, when it goes through it, it just starts carving off the ground. It's important to know that when we mine in this country, it has to be returned back to the original state on the surface. The EPA requires that, and that is unique. We are actually probably one of the most strict when it comes to how things are back. When I was in Alaska, I was at a coal mine up there, and the one side was a working phase. The other side, they had actually planted back to what it was beforehand. Okay? So on the surface, it will look the same once they're done. This is true of fracking rigs. When you look at somebody who's trying to do a fracking well, it's a pretty big, relatively big space that they're kind of moving around in, trying to drill. But then when it's done, it's only about this much that sticks out of the ground. All right, so they have to return that space. That's what our EPA makes sure, is that it's returned back to the way it was before they started touching it. All right, so surface mining or strip mining is there like that. This is an open pit mine. The open pit mine, we see this a lot in diamonds, but it's a spiral that keeps on going. Could you imagine being the guy who has to drive there? The actual, in those dump trucks, you actually sit on the left-hand side or the right-hand side of the vehicle, and you drive on the opposite side of the road. That way you can see where the edge is and you don't drive off of there. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So that's open pit mining. There is mountaintop removal, which is essentially saying we want this big of a, they'll go for it for this much coal, right? Even if I have a 2-foot seam of coal, they'll take off the 30 feet of the hilltop and then get the coal out, right? Because it's that valuable to them. And this is actually safer than going under the ground. Placer is the idea, if you see any of the mining that's going on, and if you watch Alaska Gold Rush or any of those, that's what they're doing there. It has to do with the plating for gold, if you've ever seen somebody do that or if you've done that at some amusement parks. When we go to subsurface, we have a whole different set of concerns that we would have. What does it mean, at your table, have this conversation, a canary in the coal mine? What does that mean, that phrase? Have a conversation. If you think back to when we first started doing coal mining in this country, the electronics were not as sophisticated as they are now. It's pretty obvious, right? So when we look at this, we turn around and say, okay, how, when you're underground and you're creating explosions, so you can end up making tunnels to extract things out, the air gets bad. Without electronics to monitor it, you would take a canary down with you. And the metabolism of a canary is faster than ours, so they would actually fall over in the cage. And then you would say, oh, the air's bad, we need to leave. So they used the canary as an indicator when the air was getting bad. Kind of interesting, isn't it? So a canary in the coal mine is actually a test for it. Remember that these carts that go on the tracks are only about this tall as the desk. I probably couldn't stand up in that cave that's right there, okay, or that tunnel. Remember, they just need enough to get through so they can get to the seam and then extract the seam. This is where we were talking about the concern of acid mine runoff in southern Ohio, because we have a bunch of coal mines that look like this, and although the surface has been returned, these still exist, and water runs through it, and as water runs through it, it takes pollution into the streams. So that's where the acid mine runoff comes from. The big concern when we get to a pollution piece in the process is actually the spoils that are actually laying out until they're put back, okay? They're called spoils, or they're called mining tailings. It's the dirt that you've taken, dirt, rock, whatever, you've taken out, and you stack somewhere so you can put it back. So these tailings have been processed, and the ore has been extracted. That ore is then turned around and processed more, but the stuff that is not the ore goes here. All right? So the weathering and the erosion are the big concern when we have that. It's also a concern when you look at the loss of species biodiversity, right? What you will never get back is the microorganisms that live in the soil. That's one of the big drawbacks to this, that we say that we have to change the surface back to what it was, but we don't say anything about the subsurface, right? So that's something to look at. Partially because we don't really know a lot about that subsurface, and we've had that conversation before, right? Makes sense? Everybody feel pretty good about that? All right. There is a table that exists in your textbook, Table 8.2. We've talked about this before. These tables do a really good job of summarizing things. If you're not paying attention to that when you're doing your reading, that's something that you definitely should be looking at as you work through the textbook readings that you should be doing. By the way, chapter 8 should have been read by now. You should be on to chapter 12. Everybody good with that idea? All right.